When people talk, listen, man, I'm going to raise that red flag.
This narrative, especially after 1 year, one bad year, it's one big splash move. And because I don't think people understand how much cap space we can create.
Alex, I want to ask you, because you're a very humble person.
And I'm never going to be right about anything.
Yeah.
I was right.
What's up, y'all? I'm back again. I'm actually in my own room, in my own apartment right now. So that's a little different. But honestly, I just can't sleep because I got some sunburn today. Because I was refereeing outside in Central Park, and randomly we went from, I don't know, 50-degree weather to like 100-degree weather. And, once you're there with no sunscreen, you're there with no sunscreen. And so I refereed 3 hours of flag football and just got nice and toasted. So it hurts pretty bad. And so I just decided I'm going to do this right now because I can't sleep. So what I usually do with these things is leading up to the draft, I'm big on when people talk, listen, right? Or analytics, or like history always repeats itself and that kind of stuff. But I kind of just, it's so hard to articulate my process because I do it in real time. So I kind of want to show how I, in a very simplistic way, of how I would do it with, like, let's just say I'm going to do it with Canales too. But let's just do it with Dan Morgan. So I just I went to Panthers.com and I just watched, he had 5 interviews pre-draft of just him talking about free agency in the draft. And I wanted to just kind of write down a bunch of quotes from questions he was asked, and how we can find clues by how he responds to them. Because I think that's pretty cool. And I also didn't do it that well this year, just because I didn't really have the time. A lot of stuff that like Dan Morgan would say, or a lot of stuff in general, would just be like clips that were shared over Twitter. Like, oh, Dan Morgan said this, so that's the clue. But you can't just share one clue. It has to be a part of a whole. And that's what sucks, is that a lot of the time the media or Twitterverse, whatever, will take very small sample size of what somebody has said and then turn it into this big narrative, right? What I want to do is share with whoever's listening, because if you're listening to me by now, you're probably kind of interested in how I go about my process for like predicting things, or just in general how I view football, view just an outside perspective that's probably a little interesting compared to how the masses view things, right? I just think differently. I approach things differently. I try to look things from a different perspective. I try to learn from a bunch of different people. I try to stay in my lane and what I'm good at, those kind of things. So what I wanted to do is kind of take whoever's listening through the journey that I would usually go through if I paid more attention this year, because I also just kind of want to learn Morgan's habits, learn Canales' habits. So this video will be specifically about Morgan, and I just went through his last I went through the posted interviews that he had on Panthers.com, and then the one before that, it was with Carla Metz, and I thought that was important because it was his first interview. And I always say that usually you get the most information based on the first interview, because usually people go with their first instincts, right? But if they think they have time, that like everything's going to change, that they think that, okay, I'll share with you my first instincts because everything's going to change anyway, so why not, right? But you can get a lot of information based on the freedom that they think that they have, even though they're not giving you specific information. So I literally went through every single question and wrote down every answer that had any sort of meaning at all. Like some of the questions are like, what did you think about the combine when you were playing football? Like I didn't write that kind of stuff down. And I'm giving you secondhand information. I'm going to say quotes that might not be exact. Don't kill me for it. It's close enough. I might say pretty much. And when he said kind of, whatever, that kind of stuff. So let's start with the first interview and let's see how we can gain information based on what Dan has said that can affect how we can predict the draft. And I'm going to try to be as objective as possible because I already know the results. But if you follow me on Twitter, you can see that I already kind of predicted a lot of this stuff anyway. So Parliament's asked a question basically like, what's the biggest need on this team? And his answer was interior defensive line. He said it. He said interior defensive line, duh. Right? Because he wants to stop the run. We have the worst run defense in the league. He said the draft and free agent, I think it sets us up well to attack those areas on defense, on the defensive front. And then he kind of caught himself and he said, and defense altogether. But he said defensive front, which isn't a secret anyway, so it's like whatever. So we know that first question, he wants to attack defensive front. Second question basically adds on to like what are other needs that you would need. And he says playmakers on both sides of the ball. And this is the first time that he kind of elaborates on what that is. So this matters. Like this is the kind of stuff that we're looking for. Because playmakers on both sides of the ball can mean anything, right? It could mean touchdown makers. It could mean, big gains. It could be interceptions. It could mean whatever. But he specifically says, going to look for playmakers on both sides of the ball. Guys that can take the ball away. Guys that can affect the QB, meaning pass rushers. Guys that can make plays. Receiver. He mentions receiver. Tight end. Mentions tight end. Guys that can just make big plays. And you say big. You look for these kind of words. We were kind of missing that element on both sides of the ball last year. Missing, meaning re-signing guys doesn't help. So we're missing, right? Like they didn't exist. So what do we already know? First two questions is that in general, the number one need is interior defensive line. And big plays doesn't just mean touchdowns and interceptions. It also means affect the quarterback, right? So playmakers, we're looking for outside linebackers or edge rushers. Or it could even mean like safety that can like blitz and stuff like that. But he specifically mentioned the four positions of outside linebacker, I can assume, tight end and wide receiver. And defensive back, because take the ball away. So then they start talking about the draft and like basically give us your opinion about the draft. It looks like it's going to shape up to be a good outside linebacker draft or edge rusher draft. Like she kind of sets him up a little bit with this. And he says, I think this draft is really deep and deep in the positions we need. That's important. It's important because he's saying these positions that we need that we can get in the draft. He says, defensive line, outside linebacker position, running back, and tight end. And this first four questions that she asked, I know already pretty much. I mean, that's why you have to watch every single video. But I know we're drafting. I know we have 9 picks, and we're going to draft a defensive lineman, outside linebacker, tight end, and running back. I know it. Already, I know that. I know that this is going to be drafted. And this is on February 9th that this happened. So I just got so much information. I know that the number one thing they want is interior defensive line and guys that can stop the run. And I know he's drafting defensive line, offensive line, outside linebacker, tight end, and running back in the draft. And that when he says playmakers or big plays, he's not only talking about defensive backs and pass catchers. So let's go to the next the next is the press conference for the combine. So in the combine, it's a press conference. So it's all the and usually in press conferences, you can get a little bit more out of them. There's not prep time in front of the camera. You can't get comfortable with one person asking questions. You can't get in like kind of a comfortable rhythm. It kind of puts pressure on you, like you're on the stand of in a courtroom, right? Like you kind of understand what people are going to ask you, but you don't really know. So this is Dan's first press conference, and after the first question, they ask him about Shaq and losing Shaq, and how big of a deal that is. Now, in the first interview, they didn't talk about middle linebacker at all. He didn't talk about middle linebacker, so it kind of tells me like he's okay with this position. We don't know that. He just didn't talk about it. But we basically said we love Shaq. We wish him the best. We're gonna miss him around here. He's a great person. Yada yada yada. And he said, but we're excited about Trevin and his future. And he mentions Trevin. He doesn't mention anything about Josie Jewell. He's basically making the analogy of Shaq to Trevin. Basically saying that Trevin is the heir apparent to Shaq. He doesn't talk about Josie Jewell at all. So what we know that Trevin, they like him a lot, and that Trevin's probably gonna be a starter, and they ain't that worried about middle linebacker. Already in the second interview, we have that information. So then he asks a general question of what you're looking for, and he says, playmakers on both sides of the ball. Now, why is that important? Because he says it again. It's becoming a pattern. And we know what that means. It means a wide receiver, tight end, because he's already defined it. Running backs isn't in this category. It's wide receiver, tight end, people that can affect the quarterback, which you got to assume that it's outside linebacker, probably defensive line too, because we know that that's a big deal, and defensive back. So we know these are priorities because he said it again. It's becoming a pattern. He says, they say, what are the big positions of need? And he says, up front, he says it first. So now we just know that they're going to go huge up front in the trenches. And he says, safety and corner. But he said he's not gonna neglect the offensive side of the ball. He made it a point. He didn't get asked about the offensive side of the ball. He made it a point to say he's not going to neglect the offensive side of the ball. So let's just put that like on the side for right now, because he didn't need to say that. He said it on purpose for whatever reason. So, but with that, we know that he's added safety and cornerback to this mix that he needs, and this is a general need. He didn't say he needs it in the draft or free agency. He just said it's a general need. So that order also matters. Orders matter. When they say things in order, you usually go with the first thing of importance because that's the top of your mind, especially in this specific scenario, because you're thinking on your feet. And you don't want to be the guy that's like, let me think about if I say corner, it's going to throw them off more about my draft. Like, they're not doing that because they're thinking on their feet. So the next question, he asked about the wide receiver room. He said, I love our wide receiver room. Okay, everybody's going to say that. That doesn't mean nothing. That means nothing because it's a very general statement. It means nothing. It basically, that statement buys you time to think what you want to say next. So he said, I love our wide receiver room. Thielen, Coker, Excel. And he calls him Xavier. He didn't call him Excel. He says Xavier. But think about that order again. I say orders matter. Thielen, Coker, Excel. And he says, after he says Thielen, Coker, Excel, he says, young core of guys that are still developing. Still developing. That's big. And this is right after he says, I'm not going to neglect the offensive side of the ball. So what can we deduce from that? I volunteer we're not going to neglect the offensive side of the ball. And he said the guys we have are still developing. And he says Thielen is old, reliable. Like he could have thought of any other way to describe Thielen. Thielen's a stud. And Thielen is the vet of this team. Thielen's a leader. He said old, reliable. I mean, we can get into phonetics and things like that, but usually, instinctually, you go to positive words, even when you're being sarcastic. I mean, it's just human nature. You go to positive words when you're being positive, and you go to negative words when you're being negative. So when you say things like, we're excited about Trevin, it's a good thing. When you say things like old, it's usually negative. So that's diving way too deep, and we're not going to do that right now because then I'd have to do that for everything, and I'm not doing that. But that's how he mentioned this. He basically said, I volunteered, I'm not going to neglect the offensive side of the ball, and these guys are still developing, and they're old. So we know that he wants a wide receiver. He has to, because he didn't give any of these, he didn't say what he said about Trevin, that we're excited about him. And he's already said we need a wideout and a tight end on offense. And he said that he's going to attack the tight end in the draft. So we know he's drafting tight end. We know he wants a wide receiver, at least one. And we don't, because these guys were missing last year. So just re-signing David Moore is giving you the same thing as last year. So if you're saying they're missing from what we had previous year, it means you're definitely getting one. So we know he's getting a wide receiver. We know he's getting a tight end, and he's definitely going to get it in the draft. So think about that for the offensive side of the ball. All right, so let's move on. So after he says, I'm not going to neglect offense. These guys are still developing. And then he volunteers again, we're looking for playmakers on both sides of the ball. Dude, you want a wide receiver. Regardless, you've said playmakers 3 times in a row. Tight end. He's asked about tight end. He said, our tight end room is pretty thin right now. In draft, we're looking to add one in draft and free agency or both. Well, we already know he's adding one in the draft, and this just kind of confirms it. But he basically says, we might add one in free agency as well. Okay. He said it's pretty thin, so getting 2. All right. So now I know that he's probably getting 2 because he calls it thin. He said free agent. He said draft. Remember what I said? Order. Order matters. Draft, free agency. So he definitely was getting a draft, free agency, or both. But if it's pretty thin, we're probably going to get 1 in free agency and 1 in the draft. So my tight end's covered. I don't need to even think about tight end right now. I don't even need to think about it. Except for the fact that I know he said it's deep in that position. So he's not going to draft one early. He said it's deep. So, because I guess he could get 2 tight ends, I guess. Seems pretty crazy after draft history, but whatever. So after that presser, he goes to the Schaff interview. Afterwards, he's at a little table. You've probably seen it on Panthers.com. He talks to Schaff. And those are usually where you can get kind of more BS-y, because before the cameras get turned on, he'll say, I'm going to ask you probably these questions. Are you comfortable if I ask you these questions? This is for Panthers.com. We don't want to stress you out. This is it's part for the organization. It's for the marketing, all that kind of stuff. So it's a lot more comfortable. Just going, I can't even remember what quotes I wrote. I'm just saying that's how I'm approaching this interview. So he basically says, what are you looking for in when you talk to these players? What does the combine do for you? He says I'm gonna paraphrase. He says, you get to know them. The results don't really matter unless it shows something completely opposite from your tape. But he says, always go back to the tape. Ask the analytics guy. What does that tell us? We know he's basing majority off of tape and analytics. So if you run a slow 40, your play speed is fast, I'm gonna go with the tape and the analytics. Unless you run if you're supposed to run like a 4.5 and you run like a 4.9, like that's basically what he's saying. So we know performance at combine isn't really that big of a deal. He's focused more on getting to know these players. He says you always go back to the tape and analytics. So basically don't take a lot of stock into people saying somebody's slower than they should have been, or they're not as strong as they were, yada, yada, yada. He says always go back to the tape and the analytics. He was asked about the process last year. And he does something pretty interesting. And he says, basically he's asked what were some key moments last year, sort of, kind of. I can't remember exactly what he said, but the answer was interesting. He said getting JT in the fourth, trading up to get Xavier, who we think has a bright future, who we think is going to continue to develop. He said that again. He says that continue to develop is his bright future. So he says it again, he's developing. Xavier is developing, and he mentions JT above him. And what did I say before? First thing, it usually goes in order. He said, what's your offensive targets? He said, add playmakers. He says it again, which those are. He said, add another tight end, wide out, and running back. And he's talking about the draft here. So now we know that wideout has entered the conversation in the draft. We know we've already confirmed that he's taking a tight end in the draft. He just said it. And we just confirmed that he's taking running back in the draft, which we already knew because he said it the first thing. So we just confirmed that wide receivers now on the table in the draft, confirmed our tight end and running back narrative. But what he also said is that now running back is also a playmaker. And what I would take from that is when you originally asked, you didn't use running back in the playmaker vocabulary, but you did here. So it makes me think that he's going to get speed, big gains, whatever. It means that an explosion type running back, like Tony Pollard, I guess, is like what I'm kind of thinking, like when he was in Dallas, like that kind of A-chain kind of, that, what I'm talking about. Not like the Chuba who's gonna, get 4 or 5 yards every time, gonna grind out. He'll hit like a 20-yard, he'll gash for like 20 yards every now and then, but he's gonna get you your 20 carries, 17, 20 carries. But the playmaker version of that means, to me, like the big gains, especially the way that he used it, like that was missing from our offense last year, which our big gains was what we're missing from our offense last year. But during 3 interviews, this is what I know. I know that they want a wide receiver. I don't know if they're drafting it, but I know drafting is on the table. I know they're definitely taking tight end in the draft. I know they're definitely taking a running back in the draft. I know they're definitely taking a defensive lineman in the draft, and I know that they're taking outside linebacker in the draft. I know that they're going to attack defensive line first because he told me, so that tells me that defensive line is definitely going to be in free agency. The interior, specifically run stoppers, is what they would like. He doesn't think a lot of Xavier Legette because he continuously calls him developing. He does like Trevor Wallace. And he still hasn't mentioned anything about middle linebacker in 3 interviews. They're good. They're good middle linebacker. They like who they have, I guess. I mean, they've even spoken about it. So we should be excited because they're obviously excited about Trevor Wallace. So what am I missing? The only thing I definitely know is that in the draft we're taking defensive line, outside linebacker, tight end, and running back. So then after the shop interview, Cassidy Hill, basically like a little 5-minute thing on the side, works for the Panthers, and he reconfirms this is at the combine that it's a deep defensive line and outside linebacker, and he said that is priority. So now that I know it's priority, because he hasn't used that word yet, but he said priority, and they haven't gone into the free agency yet. Those first moves are going to be at defensive line and outside linebacker. Have to be. It's priority. But it's a deep draft, and I know they're going to draft him as well. So we're going to see a lot of offensive line and outside linebackers, or defensive line and outside linebackers. Haven't mentioned middle linebacker. Haven't mentioned offensive line. So it must be good with that because they haven't mentioned them. Except they said they love Trevor Wallace. Then he's asked about I believe Shaq again. He said obviously we think a lot of Trevin, excited for Trevin and his future. He said excited again. He's using the same vocabulary for Xavier Legette, which is developing, and he's using the same vocabulary for Trevin, which is excited. Which matters. It does. It matters. So it reconfirms that they like Trevin a lot. He's where they want him to be, and Excel just ain't. But he's developing. He said, we need to be strategic about where we attack. You just told us where you're going to attack, bro. Like, you're going to attack the defensive line, outside linebacker. He said we got to stay disciplined, which mattered because in hindsight, we know that Milton Williams got a big contract, and they said, okay, good. We like you a lot, but only to this number. So stay disciplined. He made that a point. And he said free agency will affect the draft. What they do in free agency will affect the draft. So if that means something, then in theory, if I know that they're drafting defensive line, outside linebacker, tight end, running back with wide receiver as a need and on the table will be drafted, then I can say if I get these guys in, if I get an outside linebacker and defensive line and tight end and whatever, then other guys could fall because they're no longer the priority. Because he just said that free agency will affect the draft. Cool. So, his month before press conference, and they've done free agency. He comes out before questions and says, because you make a statement, and he says, we're excited to get playmakers on both sides of the ball. He says again, which at this point, he got Danny Granger at this point now. I can't remember, but like, whatever. He's re-signed Trimble. He's gotten Dowdle. He's gotten 0 wide receivers. All he's done is re-sign David Moore and sign Dan Chisnia, TJ Luther, whatever. So what do we know? Playmakers equate to wide receiver. He also, because we know that he said what we didn't have last year or was missing last year, he hasn't signed a new cornerback. He brought back in Mike Jacks. So probably need corner. We brought in Mo Rig, but I don't think anybody would say that he's the guy that takes the ball away. So we probably need safety, wide receiver. We haven't really addressed tight end. We signed Dowdle, but in this sense, remember when I told you the way that he was using playmaker, as in big plays, we haven't had running back yet. So that's why he's telling us this. That's why he started. He said, these guys are coming, guys. These guys are coming. That's why he starts it out with that. Oh, and outside linebacker, he's basically, because he said, sorry, that was also a affect the quarterback. He said affect the quarterback, and he got Patrick Jones, but that's not really. So outside linebackers in. So we know that he basically just said that. So actually, let me give you what he says next. He says, we pretty much hit on all our targets. We were going to build our defensive front. I think we did that. Like, it already happened. We built it. It's done. But we know they want to draft one because he already said it's deep in that class. But he also said that free agency affects the draft. So what can we come up with? He's not signing any more defensive linemen. He's still going to draft one, but it's going to be later because the free agency affects the draft. And he said, we were going to build our defensive front. I think we did that. Like, it's already happened. He's asked about bringing in a safety. There are a few guys on the street we like. On the street. So I know that he's looking at safety in free agency. I know that. Because he just said it. On the street we like. The numbers aren't what they need to be yet, but we will get there. Like, it's going to happen. We will get there. We'll get there. We just need to stay patient and let it happen. We're going to get it. Basically, he says, we're going to get a safety in free agency, and we just got to be patient. It will happen. It'll happen, is what he said. And it still hasn't happened yet. But we got to assume that it's coming because he just said it. And he says, he's asked about wide receiver. And he says, we're going to upgrade at every position, not just wide receiver. So you're going to upgrade a wide receiver. You answered the question. You tried to deflect it. Like, no, it's every position, not just wide receiver. We're going to upgrade everywhere. Well, you ain't upgraded wide receiver yet. So we know you're going to upgrade at wide receiver. And who's on the market? Are there any upgrades at wide receiver? No, so we're going to add wide receiver to the draft that he already said he's going to take. So now, because we said before that it was on the table, but now we definitely know that. So now in the draft, we know wide receiver, tight end, running back, defensive line, and outside linebacker are going to be taken. Those are 5 of our 9 picks. We know are going to get taken. Then he says, vet safety. He's like looking for a vet safety. He was like, a ball hawk on the backside. We're looking for players who can take the ball away. Who that is, I don't know. But we're actively pursuing. Actively pursuing. So you're just telling me that ball hawk guy, if you're actively pursuing them, is a free agent. So you're telling us right there. I'll finish the quote. I don't know who that is. I don't know, but we're actively pursuing, and we'll be aggressive when that time comes. Now, this is the same interview. He's basically saying that I'm getting a free safety in free agency, but it might take some time. But we're gonna be aggressive about it. So it ain't gonna be Ransom, or it ain't gonna be Richardson, or it ain't gonna be whatever. They're bringing in a guy. They're telling you. He just told you twice in the same interview. When that time comes. So now we know we should expect a vet free safety because he told us it's a free safety. He told us ball hawk on the backside. So that takes away, if we get a safety in the draft, the absolute need that it needs to be a free safety because he told us he's going to get one in free agency and they're going to be aggressive about it. So then he's asked about, I think Mike K asked it. He's talking about special teams because I think Canales talks about this. And he says something along the lines of, you're obviously looking for a kicker because Panera's not signed yet. We know a returner is a need of yours. Are you looking for those guys? Those seem like day 3 guys. Is that what you're thinking of? And he says, yeah, day 3 is where you usually find guys like that. When it comes to safety, he wasn't asked about safety. He said when it comes to safety, your 3rd, 4th safety, if they want to make our roster, they're going to have to play special teams. But it's up it's up to us to identify these guys. So what did you just tell me? You're drafting safety on day 3. You just said it. I didn't even ask you. And it's going to be your 3rd or 4th safety, and it's going to be a guy that can play special teams. So now I have, because you told, when people talk, listen, I don't know if you followed me. I hope you followed me this whole time. Your draft, you want a outside linebacker, defensive lineman, running back, tight end, wide receiver, and safety. I know what 6 of your picks are going to be. He said day 3 is when you usually get your returner or kicker. Acknowledge that's a need. So it makes sense that he wants a returner and a kicker. So in theory, that's 8 of our 9 picks that he's already given to us. Now, the last thing he said was kind of like he didn't specifically say that, but he acknowledged it's a need, and he said that's when you usually get them. He said he wants his roster deep and to create competition. He says he wants those big, long, strong, physical guys. He wants versatility in the running back room, and he says Rico will bring a run style similar to Chuba. So if you want versatility, and Rico brings it similar to Chuba, I kind of know that he wants basically a pass catching back. And if I know that he wants a pass catching back, and I know that he's mentioned running back and playmakers, he wants an explosive back. And he also said that running back is deep in this draft. So he's told me that what kind of running back he wants. And he's told me when he wants to take him. Because it's a deep running back draft. He said, you're looking for production. For the whole body of work to be there. He said the whole body, as far as like not just last year, but multiple years. The whole body of work to be there. When asked what you're looking for, are you looking for traits or are you looking for production? And he said production. So we know that he's looking for players that have produced. He literally said, I want to add to the front, which confirms our defensive line that we know is going to happen. He then is asked about to confirm what Canales said about Xavier Legette being like the guy in the room. And then again, he said we're excited about the development of Xavier and Coker. And he throws Coker in there too. So he's saying both those guys are developing. And he keeps using the same word. But he did say he's excited about their development. He never says anything about Trevin Wallace's development. Interesting. He's talking about Granger, like he's asked about the tight end room, and he said it's just an opportunity to add a guy and be open-minded. That's basically telling me they're not sold on Granger coming in. Reconfirms they're taking tight end in the draft. Asked about Jalen Walker. This was very interesting. He said, he's an outside linebacker for us. I think he's a great person and a really good player. And, I think he has a bright future ahead of him. It's like saying, hey, do you like my friend? Well, I think they're a great person. and granted, it's right before the draft, so he's not going to give anything away. But it's just funny that he's like, I think he's a good person. Instead of being like, oh yeah, no, he has like really good traits, like we like him a lot, but we like other players a lot too. Like, he's like, no, he's a really good person. I think he's gonna have a bright future. He's a great kid and super smart. He's super smart. Super duper. Oh God, I wish I would have watched this interview because I don't know how I would have felt about it. I don't know if I was too sold on him at that point already. But it's funny to look back on him. He said about safety, basically asked, do you need a safety? They said, yep. Like out of nowhere. He said, safety is definitely an area we have to address. He said, free agency kept us from having to take defensive line. Well, you just basically told me you're not taking defensive line because you saw it in free agent. That's actually the second time you told me that. Uh, he said he was asked. This is a good question. I can't remember who asked it. I think it was Mike K. No, I think it was. I can't remember who it was. But he said he was asked a question. That was kind of leading and kind of trapped in. He said, "It looks like it's a deeper tight end class." He's basically using Dan's words because Dan already said this. Then wide receiver class. Is it fair to say that wide receiver kind of fades out after the first 3 rounds, and tight end runs deeper? And then Dan said, "Yeah, it's fair to say that." He said, "I think that's fair." He said, "I think in the first 3 rounds, you'll get a good wide receiver." So basically reconfirms that you take tight end late because it's deeper, which we already know he thinks that. And basically said that wide receiver, because they have to pick them because they already said they're going to upgrade that room. Not just wide receiver, but they're going to upgrade the room. And he says, first 3 rounds. So we know they're taking wide receiver. We know they're taking him in the first 3 rounds. They asked a question about good programs because basically Dan said something about we want guys from good programs. And then he answered, it's just about drafting the best football player. So it kind of contradicts what he said before. I didn't listen to that interview again, but I think everybody that is listening kind of remembers when he said, we want guys from good programs. And now he says, it's just about drafting the best football player, which basically means it doesn't matter where they come from. Just best football player. So let's take all of this together and work backwards. So we know the major priority was interior defensive lineman, and we know that he wants to draft him because that's the depth of the draft. He loves the depth, and it takes on their need. But then he says, we addressed that free agency. Then he said free agency, this is another thing, he said free agency allowed us not to have to draft defensive line, even though we know they're drafting it because that's the depth of the draft. So basically he's saying that they're still going to draft defensive line, but they're not going to draft him early, right? So then let's go to safety. So safety. We know they want their free safety in free agency. Because he said it. He said the ball hawk. We also know that he wants to pay attention to playmakers on both sides of the ball. So free safety is very important because that's where a lot of the interceptions come from. And they're going to be aggressive but patient in that. So we know free safety probably ain't happening in the draft because he told you twice they're going to be aggressive on that. And they want to bet. And then he said that safety is definitely taking safety in the draft. But he wants a guy, because he says it, our third or fourth safety is going to play special teams. He also said that special teams is going to happen on day 3. That's where you're special team guys. So we know they're taking a safety, and we know that that's going to be on day 3. Then we'll go running back. We know that he added running back to when he said about playmakers. He said Chuba and Rico have the same skill set. So you would think that they're going to get a pass-catching, explosive back. And he said that the running back class is deep. So I would say day 3 with those things. You don't have to say day 3, but he said the depth of the draft is there, and he wants a pass-catching back, like a lot of the strengths are like 3-down backs early on. So I'm going to say day 3, running back. So we got day 3, defensive line, day 3, safety, day 3, running back. Tight end, he said originally that that's where the depth of the draft was. He said we were going to take one in free agency, draft, free agency, or both. He said draft first. Somebody said draft. He was asked, is it fair to say if the depth of the draft, basically the tight end deeper than wide receiver, that you can only get wide receiver in the first 3 rounds? He said, yeah, that's fair to say. So I know the depth of the draft that is there, and I know that the depth of tight end goes deeper than 3 rounds. Then the tight end is my day 3 pick. Then he said, say outside linebacker. He included that with priority with defensive line, but he only brought in Jones. So he's going to go offensive line. Oh, since it's a priority, that's going to be, let's say, first 3 rounds. And he's also said that's the depth of the draft. I'm not saying I could predict this to a T, but if that's the depth, and I already have all these guys penciled in as my day 3 guys, you would think that they wouldn't just draft one number 1. If that's the depth of the draft, they're going to take 2, even if they took one number 1. Either they're going to take one number 1 and one late, or they're going to take 2 in the top 3. So I'm just going to say 2 in the top 3 because he also said that they need a kicker and a returner, and you get him on day 3. So I'm going to say kicker and returner on day 3. But I don't have enough picks. I don't think. 2, 3, 4. That's it. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I have six picks. So now I know I have everything that he said for my day 3 picks. And now I know he wants wide receiver in the first 3 rounds, and I know the depth of the class is offensive linebacker. So the depth of the class is offensive linebacker. He has to be taking 2 and 1 receiver. Now, let's go back to what he said he's looking for. He said, you want those big, long, strong, physical guys. Never mentioned middle linebacker, but he did say they need to get a corner, but there were no picks left. Because he filled them all up. He told us everything he was going to do. So they gave 2 in undrafted free agency guaranteed money. And watch out, there's still a lot of corners on the market. So this was fairly easy to predict. I know that's Monday morning quarterback, and I know there's no way that I can actually prove that I could have come up with this. But at least you're seeing what my process is and how we can, I mean, people can do the same thing. Just looking for things that they say. The problem is you can't be lazy about it because you can't just watch one interview and make that call. Because if you do that, you make the mistake of saying, he said he only wants guys from that are winning programs like Georgia and Ohio State. Because then you'll miss when he says in the last interview, it's just about drafting the best football player when re-asked that same question. So anybody can do it. You just have to put everything on the same level and not hold one thing above the other. And you can't say, well, he's definitely drafting somebody from Georgia or Ohio State or something like that. Because you had this other information and you just didn't do the work. And that's what I did. I just didn't do the work. All right, that's it. Thanks for listening. I'm kind of tired now. I'll probably go to bed. Peace.